Does mine say that it's you?
Yeah.
This is so interesting. You see how it looks in your. Oh,
You're not. I look like I'm on there twice.
Around sound.
yeah.
All right. It looks like it's 6:30. I never know how long we should wait and give people time to arrive. But it is so nice to see so many names and a couple of faces. And I am so grateful for everyone taking the time to show up tonight. And this is such an important topic. And I'm so glad that you decided to take the time out to meet with us. And hopefully you will get some good information that will be helpful to you. My name is Kingsley Moore, and I am the Donor Family Services Aftercare Coordinator at Sharing Hope. We are Sharing Hope, South Carolina. And I have been with We Are Sharing Hope for about 8 years, but in this role specifically for only about 4. And this specific workshop and talking about correspondence is something that's been really heavy on my heart and something I've wanted to do since I came over. So I'm super excited tonight to be able to just get a chance to talk about correspondence and how important it is, and hopefully be able to provide some information that's helpful to families, which is always the ultimate goal. I would love to introduce or let them introduce themselves. We have several DFS members, and DFS meaning Donor Family Services, that are on the call tonight. And the reason and what we specifically do in DFS is after donation happens, we take over caring for the families. So hopefully you had someone in the hospital or on the phone with you that is walking you through the process of donation. And then once donation is concluded, they pass you over to us so that we take care of you. So any questions you have now following donation, we would love for you to just reach out to us, and we're going to put our numbers up on the screen and make sure you have access and you know where to call us if you have any questions. So I would love the other members of our team to introduce themselves if they are on here.
All right, well, I will go first and just introduce myself briefly. My name is Christine. I am the Director of Communications with We Are Sharing Hope, so it's an honor to serve our families and our community in this capacity. And I've been working in the organ procurement organization arena for the last 11 years. And so I recently, well, I say recently, it's been about 2.5 years, joined South Carolina from the Orlando OPO, where I had the opportunity to also work with our donor families in aftercare as well as our ER team, which is what my role is here as well. And so we were happy to have Kingsley join our team over the summer, and this was something that she is very passionate about. So We're thrilled to be able to offer this correspondence workshop to our families and those recipients. I see you, Pete. And making sure that we are able to answer those questions for our community throughout the entire correspondence process. We know it's something that's very important to all of you in your healing journey, and so we hope that tonight will help to answer a lot of those questions, maybe give you some ideas that you had not thought of before, and really just let you know that you're not alone as you journey through this correspondence process. So happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation this evening.
Thank you, Christine. I'm loving that more people are coming in. If I could encourage everybody to hit their mute button, I think that might help. Unless we're talking, I think the more people that are muted, probably it's going to be better for everyone to hear. And the mute button should be up at the top. Are we good? And then there's also a chat bubble up at the top of your bar. And if you have any questions as we go along and want to type them in, you're also welcome to voice them, whichever you feel comfortable. We're really here for you, so we want to make sure that you're getting your questions answered. You can always call us afterwards, but while we're here and you have us, we do have another Donor Family Services member, but I don't think he's on quite yet, so hopefully he will be in here soon and we can introduce him. I thought it might be nice if we could go around and maybe introduce yourself, tell you how you're connected to the process of donation, and that would be great just to get to know each other a little bit. If anybody who's willing, you certainly don't have to, but if you're willing to, unmute yourself and kind of say why you're here and how you're related to donation process.
Kingsley, if you want to call names, that way it's easier.
Okay. Great. Let's see. Miss Anna Bailey. I see Miss Anna Bailey here.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Hi,
Would you
everyone.
like to introduce yourself and kind of tell who you are and how you're related to the process?
I'm Anna Bailey, and I'm a transplant social worker at MUSC, and I work with pediatric families in heart, liver, and kidney. And I just, really encourage my families to write letters, to the donor family. And Kingsley, invited me just to come so I could just listen to hear the other side of it. So hopefully I can learn more, and just help everyone through this process.
I'm so glad you're here, Anna. And Mindy is also not only just a staff member at Sharing Hope, South Carolina, but she is a living donor. And she's going to tell us her story in a little while. But Mindy, I don't know, I guess I just told your story.
Yeah, you did a great intro for me.
And she's going to share a little bit more as we go along, kind of. She's got a unique and touching story. So, Julie, I see you're on. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Julie Grant, and I am the wife of a donor. My husband passed away 2 years ago, and so I've been corresponding with the recipients and have had great outcomes with that. And so Kingsley asked me if I'd want to come and share, and I'm happy to do that. Oops, sorry, I can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
All right, well, Teresa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Teresa, and my son is an organ donor.
Awesome. We're so grateful for his gift, Teresa, and we're glad you're here. And then Carla?
Hi, my daughter's name was Megan Relier, and she's the donor.
She was. I just spoke with you yesterday, Carla. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this.
And hi, Pete.
Hello, Pete Schwob. I'm a lung recipient. On the 14th of November, it'll be 15 years, bilateral. So when I got the message, I just figured later on I can tell some info that I learned when I finally connected with my donor family almost 6 years after my transplant.
Wow. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here, Pete. Getting the perspective from every side, I think, is helpful for everybody. And Joe, I see Joe back in the corner of my computer. Would you like to introduce yourself, Joe? And Joe, hit the mic for me. You're doing what I was doing. I forgot my mic's off. There we go. There we go.
Okay.
Good job.
Yes, this is Horace Taker. This is my wife's computer. That's why I said Joe. I'm new to this kind of stuff. My grandson passed away in June, and he's an organ donor. And I'm trying to figure out how to get through all of this stuff. It's been tough.
Well, we're here and we want to help. So any information we can get you after this, you're always welcome to give us a call and we can reach out to you as well. But thanks for coming.
Okay, thank you.
And I see Kim's on here.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
My son Lauren was an organ donor last April out of MUSC. So the family reached out to me in about June, and I never returned their letters. So I just want to, I think I'm ready to do that.
Well, the first step is knowing when you're ready, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So I'm glad to hear that and grateful. And Allison.
Hi. My son was an organ donor. He has been gone for 9 years. We have received 2 letters from recipients, but we would like to write them all.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, we're hope that you can learn something here that's helpful in knowing some steps and how to do that. All right. Well, if everybody wants to go on mute, that way we won't hear anybody's background, that would be great. And then I will go ahead and get started. So the goal of this group and the goal of me doing this workshop was that I felt it was so important for us to kind of talk about what the barriers are to people reaching out and corresponding. At Sharing Hope, we would like to help do that. We want to walk with you through the process and answer any questions you have and support you and just do anything we can to help. I think it's a very hard thing to do, but it's also something that is very meaningful to reach out and correspond. And what we mean by correspond is any kind of written communication that's happening between the donor family and the recipients, and it's facilitated or it's kind of worked through us in between. And the reason is for the protection of both sides. Everybody's ready at a different place and time in their life and emotionally ready. So we want to kind of help bridge that and meet each side where they're at. So what we do is help walk you through that. And why does correspondence matter? Well, I think it matters for lots of reasons. For donor families, it's a great opportunity for you guys to voice your feelings, what it has meant to you, find meaning in the donation itself. The donation is such a difficult time when that happens, that being able to find meaning through talking to the people that you were able to help, that your loved one was able to help, is very helpful for the healing process. We have found that, and we want to help do that with you. For the recipients, and Pete, as a recipient, you probably could answer this too. It also provides an opportunity with corresponding to share your feelings and also give thanks for the people who were willing to give the gift for you. So each side comes at it from a different perspective maybe, but it's helpful and healing for both sides. So that's why we think it's so important. And we've seen, you know, how that can help heal both sides. So that is what I think, why I think it's so important for sure. Donation offers hope, and sometimes it's an otherwise hopeless situation for both the donor family and for the recipient. So where do you get started? Well, I think the first step is something I think, Kim, you mentioned, that you were ready to write emotionally, that you're at that place where you've decided, I'm ready. And just like every other part of this process, there's no right or wrong. There's no good time, bad time. It's when you feel ready. And so for some people, that might be immediately. For some people, that might be years. And we just want to make sure, first of all, that everybody knows that whatever your process is and wherever you are emotionally and ready, then that's when it's the right time. So once you have, you know, you feel like you may be ready, what are some things that you can do to help kind of make it easier for you? And sometimes it comes down, we found it to as simple as, you know, setting the mood and setting a tone for it being in a place to write. I know for me, if I've journaled, and, you know, sometimes if I turn the music on, if there's certain music that inspires me, maybe certain music that makes you think about your loved one, that makes you able to write and frees you up. It also may be being in a certain place, a certain time of year. There are lots of things that you don't want bad triggers necessarily, but triggers that can make you think of the person that you're writing about, because what you want to do is share with the recipient or the donor family, whichever side you're writing, about the person that was able to give the gift. So we want to share with them a little bit. And a lot of questions we get are, what do you share? I think it's important to share about the person, maybe some hobbies, what they love to do, what the gift was able to do for them and how it changed their life. I think it's also important to think about being neutral. And by that, I mean, cultural norms may be different. You don't know exactly who you're writing. You may know a little bit about where they are or what they received as a gift, but you don't know too much about them personally. So you want to try to take into account that they may be from a different cultural background. They may be from, you know, a different age group. So just being neutral, you know, not a lot of people, this is a faith related journey, and that's wonderful, but it may not be for the person who's receiving the letter. So you want to share about yourself, but also remember that they may not be in the exact same place. One of the things I think Christine mentioned one time, and she may be wanting to say this right now, that to keep it simple. And that when you're first writing your first letter, your first attempt, as you get started, you're thinking these wonderful, grandiose things about how this has really changed you, or how, you know, what this has meant to you. And sometimes you think, oh, that's not good enough, or, oh, that's not, you know, what I'm trying to say. Well, you know, getting started and keeping it simple and just, you know, being grateful and how that's changed your life. Christine, did you want to add in anything to that?
Sure. So first, I'd like to welcome Ruben. I see him joined the team. So for those of you who may not know, Ruben is the other aftercare coordinator on our team. So he will bring some wisdom to this conversation as well, having served our families here in South Carolina for, I won't say how many years, just a good number of years. So welcome, Ruben. And so, yeah, no, I just wanted to follow up on Kingsley's couple of points in correspondence. And from a donor family standpoint, understanding, again, that there's no right answer as to when is the right time. We've had families journey with us who have done it, as Kingsley said, right away, and others who have waited years. And so Pete said 6 years until he began that correspondence process with his donor family. And so that's really important for everybody to understand. Also, you know, setting the mood is very important, but also just clearing your mind and understanding that there's no pressure with the words that you put on paper. I say that to mean that any response at any point is received from both sides openly, and that is something that a lot of times our families and our recipients both put a lot of pressure on themselves to write the perfect letter. And what we've seen, and Ruben and Kingsley can join in with the conversation, but what we've seen is that as you start with a simple sort of explanation of who your loved one was, who they were to you, and how organ donation allows them to continue being that for others. With that simple sort of framework, that opens the door to develop conversations and relationships. And through letters, what you can find, and Julie can share her story, but is that it begins to build a relationship. So understanding that that first letter may not have to have all the information, but that it is that starting point. And again, to Kingsley's point, I just want to reiterate that every person's journey is different. And so some people are ready when they receive their correspondence, and we can talk a little bit about that in a little bit as well. Others hold on to that correspondence, and even if they don't write back right away, that doesn't mean that they haven't gotten it. It doesn't mean that they haven't processed it. It doesn't mean that they don't think about it every day. So I just want to also make sure that we acknowledge that. And, you know, they are also processing their feelings in terms of responding. And so one of the things I think we as an organization want to share is that the correspondence journey for everybody is extremely personal. And so for our families who are on the call today, thank you for thinking of taking that first step, and for being here so that you can hear what little pieces of what might help you as you begin, and know that there's no expectations of anything from this meeting or from future, but that just that we are here as an organization to support you in your journey. So Ruben, did you want to say anything, add anything to that?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you this evening, and I'm excited. This is actually the very first correspondence workshop we've ever done since the organization started, so I'm really excited. A lot of nostalgia, but I love this whole new way of being able to help families with some concrete ideas. I do want to add just a couple of things to what you said, Christine, because I think you were spot on. Oftentimes, as far as when you send a letter to, for instance, like a recipient or to the donor family, there's a lot of processing that goes on their side. So even though it may have reached them and they're reading it, they may not respond as quickly as you would like. For example, one of our local families, who's a great volunteer for us for years, actually sent correspondence for 7 years to her donor family. She's a kidney recipient, and sent it for 7 years before the donor family responded. And I talked to the donor family probably in about the 6th year, just to kind of say, hey, you know, this person does work with us. Just wanted to make sure that you got it, everything's okay, because she really does want to talk to you. And basically the response is, you know, I've just been reading it, and it's just been taking me some time to kind of be able to articulate how I feel, because, you know, after all, it was my daughter's kidney. And so there's a lot of feelings that goes in there. So patience really is the key. So thank you, Christine, for really bringing that out. That is really and it's not that the donor family or the recipient is really not grateful. They're really grateful. But this is pretty big stuff. This is like life-saving stuff. and people really do have trouble trying to articulate and put their thoughts to paper. So I'm really glad what Kingsley was saying, as well as Christine, to try to keep it real simple so you can actually get some kind of response to either the recipient or the donor family, wherever the side of the coin that you sit on. So thank you for bringing that up. That's really, really important.
Thanks so much, Ruben. Julie, I was wondering if this might be a good time for you to share a little bit about your story. Julie, as she mentioned earlier, is a wonderful member of our family. We consider a member of our family. Her husband, John, was a donor and saved 4 lives and countless people's lives enhanced because of his gift. So Julie, if you'd like to share a little bit about from your personal experience, we would love that.
Okay, thanks. I think everything that I've heard so far is spot on for me. The thing that was kind of an epiphany for me, I told Kingsley the other day that I had never really thought before, is you have the donor and recipients are coming from such totally different angles, in that usually a donor is of a family member who's been lost suddenly, like the organs are more viable for the sudden deaths and stuff. So if that is the case indeed, you have to really make sure that you're handling your grief before you try to reach out. And I think that's something that you need to give yourself pause to, take that in and see where you are in your journey. And each one is so personal. I'm working with Grief Share also, and it's just amazing to see how each person's journey through grief is just, it's their own path. So you need to kind of see where you are on your path before you reach out, because I think the most important thing to share when you write your first letter to somebody is to be honest and to be real and to share your heart, that this person, what they meant to you, how long you were together, or if it's your, child, or things that they liked. And I know in the little packet that I got, I actually read my little packet, and it had an outline, and I found that to be very helpful, just like some of the basics. But I also, another thing, I think, I wrote some notes here, sorry. Another thing that I think that you have to take into account is to be empathetic for what they're going through, because a lot of these people have been very ill for a long time. And so they also are recovering, and they're processing, and they're trying to, or they've not been that ill for very long, and they've gotten this gift of life, and they feel so much better, they want to share it, and so they're like, woohoo, and you're like, not so much. But I found that you need to be empathetic. And one of the biggest things, and I reached out to all of the recipients that I've corresponded with this week and asked them, like, was there any one thing or other that was helpful in our correspondence? And they all said that for me, telling them not to feel guilty was really important, because I really wanted them to know that of all the emotions you may be feeling, guilt should not be one of those emotions. That in the hospital, when they asked us about organ donation, that was like the easiest decision we had to make in those 24 hours, because everything else was not hopeful in any way. But I remember standing with my sons and saying, if we can stop somebody else from feeling what we're feeling right now, is that not like the most awesome thing that we can do? So it was just such a gift for us to do that, at that time. So don't feel guilty. That's, for us, it was hope. I mean, it was just a way of John's legacy of kind of moving on into the world. And I call it his light ripples or love ripples, going out. But I actually received a letter from a recipient first, probably a month and a half or 2 months later. She had written that letter while she was in the hospital. She received John's kidney, I think it was his left, and wrote that letter in the hospital. And it was just scrawling handwriting, just, like page after page in a notebook. But it is just precious. And she was just so thankful, and didn't put any pressure to write. She said, if you don't want to write, I understand, but if you do. And so she and I have been corresponding since that time. And she's from California, and I'm from California. So actually, when we went out, we met her and her mom, and it would have been her entire family. She's Cuban American. Her entire Cuban American family wanted to come. They couldn't all get there at the time. But it really has been a very healing journey. And I encourage anybody, if you feel like you're at a place in your grief where you are seeing some light come through, because I know it's a real dark path, initially, but if you're starting to see a little bit of light, I think that this, it's very healing and is very helpful.
Well, Julie, you are certainly a light for us, and I am so grateful that you're willing to share your story, and so many ripples will become because of that story, and we're grateful for that. So thank you.
Can I say something, please?
Absolutely. And who's I'm looking at? Oh, Kim. Yes, Kim.
Yes. When I received my letter, it was about a couple of months later too. And unfortunately, I'm at work right now. I came in 30 minutes early so that I could be a part of the group.
Thank you.
Clock in at 7. But so I just wanted to ask a quick question before I have to go. Because I received mine so early, and it was a young child, 12 years old, in Florida, that received my son's heart, and her family let me know how grateful they were. And so what I wanted to do, is it okay when I reach out to them? I'm gonna keep it simple, but is it okay to let them know that I would love to meet the little girl someday? Can that be a part of the letter? I wasn't sure what way to ask that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And if I may answer that just real quick, Kim, absolutely. So we encourage that if that's something that's on your heart, to put that in the letters, and then that will help us in the organization understand how to proceed with potential meetings in the future. So if you do put it in your letter, and they respond that they would as well, then we're able to begin that process of meeting and releasing information so that you have that to connect with them without us serving as that intermediary. So absolutely, Kim, if that is something that you are interested in, then I encourage you to include that, and they will know, and then we would be able to help support that path forward if and when the response came back that they were also interested. And we can follow up with you if you would like. Okay. I know you have to leave now, but we can absolutely follow up with you and make sure that you have all of the information that you need to begin that process.
Great. Thank you. I was wondering about that as well.
Absolutely. So if you wouldn't mind either emailing, if you have one of our emails, Kingsley's is Moorek, MOOREK, @Sharing Hope SC, and Ruben's is Wright, WRIGHTR, @SharingHopeSC.org, and either one of them would be happy to help you with that process.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for having me as part of the group. I've enjoyed it, and I just wish everybody the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Kim, and we'll definitely reach out to you for sure after this. And we're going to explain a little bit about the process and what it looks like, but I really, there is someone else I wanted to introduce tonight that has a story that's a little bit different than what we're used to hearing when it comes to deceased donation. So Mindy, like I mentioned, works for Sharing Hope. And Mindy, would you like to say something?
Yes. Hi, thank you for inviting me along here. Even though my experience with communicating with my recipient is a little bit different, I think I can maybe speak to it in a way that relates to some other people. So my donor and I were able to meet while we were both, my recipient and I were both still able to meet while we were in the hospital. But even though we were eager to meet, there was still a little bit of that apprehension, just not knowing what to expect. You don't know what the person on the other end is like, or Kingsley, just like you said, their culture, or, just how they are as a person. You don't know what to expect, so you want to try to keep it neutral. That was perfect what you said. So we started off just very basic. I think at the time we were both still on pain medicine, things like that. It was just kind of like a high and by kind of thing. But as the weeks and the months went on and we started feeling just a little bit more comfortable with one another, we eventually started getting into just a little bit more of the personal information, like both of us saying why we were in the position we were in. And because I certainly didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable and ask him why he needed the kidney, and he didn't want to make me uncomfortable and ask me why I wanted to donate. But eventually we got there. It was just really a process, and we were just kind of feeling one another out and not putting any pressure on one another, and just kind of leaving the lines open like that. If I could give a tip, I would say to just kind of follow that a little bit. Just not to have the pressure to get too personal too quick if you're not comfortable with that, and just do what works for both of you. I can't hear you.
Sorry. What is it at? I know the other day we were talking about how it feels to know that you've helped somebody, and when they're doing well, to feel that it feels good to hear their story. And I think that's so neat that you're able to still connect to them and hear from them. So we're so grateful also that you were willing to give the gift as a staff member. That's true dedication, I would say, and believing in the mission if you're willing to give the kidney. So you're always an inspiration to me, and I'm so grateful to have witnessed that gift and to see you go through the process. And it was a beautiful thing. So I'm so grateful to you, and I just wanted everyone else to hear how cool you are and what you were able to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I wanted to share a little bit about what the process is for corresponding, because I think that can be very confusing. And I am a visual learner, so we have some slides that we are going to show. If I can. Okay, I might have to have some technical support here. Here. Which one? I apologize for the need for technical support. This is still.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi. Okay, so now you'll just have to click this
one.
Victoria's always lurking to help us.
Isn't she so handy? There we go.
Looks good.
All right. So this first slide is a great visual representation of kind of what the process looks like. All right, can everybody see it? You are able to see it now. Okay, so this would be specific for organ donation. And this is a great opportunity to talk a little bit about the difference between organ donation and tissue donation. And I think there is some confusion for everyone, including hospitals and people in general, about the difference. So organ donation happens when someone is able to, they are still alive, their heart is still beating, but their brain has died. We've got brain death. So we are able to help them through that process at the hospital. We will have somebody there to help them through, and they are able to donate organs. And this is the process that what happens when we as DFS take that family on and help them write that letter and what happens at that point. So if you look at the first slide, the first number one, it's got donor family writes the letter. So once you write the letter, if you follow the white little line and arrows around, the next step would be to send that letter to the OPO. And what OPO stands for is Organ Procurement Organization. And that is us. We are Sharing Hope, South Carolina. So in South Carolina, we're the only OPO. Now, other states have some, if they're bigger states, obviously have bigger OPOs because they have a larger area to cover. So there are 58 in the United States, and in South Carolina, we're the only OPO. And then once we receive that letter from the family, then we move on and we take that and we make sure that we keep a copy of it. And the reason would be we want to make sure if somewhere in between all of this travel that the letter is doing, if it's in any way lost, we want to make sure that we have a copy so that everyone can be able to see it. And then what we would do is pass that letter on. And where does that letter go? Well, that letter goes on to either the transplant center where the person has had the donation has happened, or hold on, I'm losing my. It's going to the transplant center. I'm having trouble. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So it's going to the transplant center for the recipient or the OPO that's responsible for that. And what that means is the recipient had their transplant at another hospital. So that hospital would either be responsible for that or the OPO for that area, which is what we are, OPO. So it's different. I wish I could explain how, which state does which, and it's different. Christine, I don't know if you want to take that.
Yeah. Sure. No. So the recipient side really is focused on getting the information to the recipient. So most of the correspondence goes to their transplant center, and then the transplant coordinator is able to work with the family to send that correspondence on. Across the country, there are some OPOs who facilitate all of the correspondence and work with the transplant center to get the information to send that correspondence to the recipient. So that we then just send it to our sister OPOs across the country, and we have a list of which transplant centers require direct correspondence to go to the transplant centers and which transplant centers require us to go through their local OPO. So hopefully that's clear.
And does anybody have any questions as we're going along? Just let me know. I was trying to make it as easy as possible to kind of understand a very complicated process. And I think a lot of times people assume, and I probably would too, that so when they write the letter, then we forward it on to that family. And I wish that it could be as simple as that, but it isn't for a variety of reasons. And so what we will then do once we receive that letter and make a copy and send it on to that OPO or recipient transplant center, they would then have that letter and forward it on to the recipient. And so once that recipient receives that family letter from them, if you'll notice, the blue lines are going to go the opposite direction so that we could take this entire process back through if we wanted to go from recipient to donor family versus donor family to recipient. Does that make sense?
Hey, Kingsley, this is where I should probably come in.
I would love that, Pete.
Mine was in reverse since I'm a recipient. So I sent it to the donor family. And I may have sent I think I sent a second one I think the first one is about 9 months. And the second one was about 1.5 years, and I never heard anything. So it's like, well, I'm not going to write any more because I got 2 of my letters. And then I started thinking about it. So it was about roughly 5 years later. And I was talking to my coordinator at a visit, and I said, I never heard from my family. And she says, and they don't know as much as there's their person it was actually at the University of Florida. It was off-site, so it was a couple miles away. So afterwards, I got in the car, went over to this location, and talked to her, and I said, I wrote 2 letters, never heard back. The only question that I have is, did they receive my letters? If they did, and they don't want to respond, that's fine. But I just want to know if they received them. So it can work on both ways.
And she said, she pulled out the file. She says, let me call them as I'm standing in the room. She got a voicemail, and I said, okay, well, she left the message. And by the time I drove home 2 hours away, she had called me back and said that the recipient, the donor's son, had called her back and said, I don't remember getting any letters, but I would like to hear from them. So I wrote another letter, and within that letter, I said, would you prefer email? And he wrote back, or maybe he just emailed me. I can't remember since I left my email address there. And then that way we corresponded. But I think the main thing is that, because they told me that, and I don't, you probably know better than I, the percentages of it, of what percent do write back and correspond, because some don't want to. And I understand that it's probably tougher for the donor families to write back, because the recipients, we're just so dang happy. I mean, we got the good side of it.
Yeah.
Whereas they have much more grief. So like I say, I don't know what the odds are, but as long as I knew that they got the letters, I would have been happy. And when they said they didn't or they couldn't remember, then it all came to fruition after that.
And I think that's one of the reasons on our end we like to keep that copy, that we have that, so that, let's say Pete comes back and says, I never got that letter. I can say, well, let me pull it up, and it might not be the same handwritten, but I have a copy of that handwritten letter that I can then give to you. And then, you know, I'll have a date on there of when we sent it, and you will be able to get it. So that's our goal and why we keep a copy.
And to that point as well, Kingsley is exactly right. And then what we also strive to do at We Are Sharing Hope and across the country is to make sure that we're connecting with our families when we receive letters for the first time. So if we have received a recipient letter from that is for one of our families, that's an opportunity for us to connect with our families and share with them that we have received a letter and that we would like to forward that on so that they are anticipating receiving that in the mail, and that it doesn't necessarily catch them off guard. And so we try as much as we can on our end to make sure that we follow through with the process. And we can even do wellness checks with our transplant center partners to see if A, they had received the letter, and B, how they're doing, so that we can help to provide that information back to our families. So to your point, Pete, yes, absolutely. Knowing that they received that and having that in the system is critically important.
I wanted to show quickly another slide just to show the difference between organ and tissue donation process. It's a little bit different when you're corresponding. The goal is exactly the same, and the feelings associated are exactly the same. The reason that I wanted to show this slide is just because there is a little bit different in the process and the way it goes. And there's also, Ruben, if you'd like to share a little bit about the timing related to the process, if you wouldn't mind, how tissue is a little bit different.
Yeah, with tissue, it's a little bit, again, it's different than the recovery and the transplant of organs. The tissue, once the recovery is done, because usually the organs are recovered first, then the tissue is recovered. Once the tissue is recovered, it then has to go through a preparation process at one of our tissue partners, and they prepare that tissue for transplantation. And that's where the time, the longevity in time does make a significant difference, because it takes usually anywhere between 6 months to 9 months for it to be prepared for transplantation. And so oftentimes, maybe if you haven't yet, but I remember the classic response for getting some kind of knowledge about where your tissue has gone, everybody would tell donor families at least give it close to a year about a year, because not only once it's prepared for transplantation, then a physician has to order that to be used on one of their patients. So usually it's still about, again, 6 to 9 months, and then maybe, again, another month or two or so, but it's about a year. It's about a year before we can really get all of that information. Now, there is some variation with that because heart valves are different, of course, and there's some variation in that. But we encourage everybody just to go ahead and start the process anyway. And but know that it does take a little bit longer for tissue to get that information in.
And the reason for that, if you think about it and stop for a minute, it makes sense. When you're transplanting an organ, your kidney, your heart, those are going to be transplanted immediately because they're going to need to be transplanted immediately for them to be viable. When it comes to tissue, let's say you are able to transplant and do a knee replacement. It may not be that knee replacement happens the same week that the donor family loses someone. It could be a year later. It could be months. We just don't know for sure. So for organ donation, we pretty quickly at least have some idea of where that was able to be transplanted and where that went. Whereas tissue, it takes a little bit longer on the back end. And part of that also is because there are so many gifts that can happen from tissue donation. Up to about 75 grafts can be transplanted, things that can actually make a huge enhancement in people's lives from one donation. So it may take a little bit longer, and there are more of them going different places. Christine, did you want to add something?
Sure. I was just going to add our commitment as an organization to our tissue donor families is to do as many follow-ups as we can at the request of our families to see if additional gifts have been able to be shared. So one of the things that if anybody on the call tonight is a tissue donor family, we encourage you to continue to correspond with us, to call us. We can work with our partners to determine what gifts have been able to be shared, how many gifts have been able to be created, and that changes. And so that's a commitment that we make to our families to be able to provide that information on a regular basis in constant communication with our families. So just wanted to share that.
And I just wanted to explain a little bit about the difference because of the timing. It looks like from the organ slide to the tissue slide that the tissue would be, there's one less place for it to go. So there's one less person in between to act for that process to happen, but it does usually take a little bit longer. I didn't know if there was anybody else on the call that are donor families or recipients that have already been in that process that had any advice that they'd want to share about the process itself, maybe any tips on what's worked for you or something that's been helpful. We'd love to know. We'd always love to know. I think it's a confusing process, and I was hoping that the visual would be able to help explain maybe why it takes a little bit longer. And of course, we can't we can't assure that they're going to absolutely respond. But perseverance, as Ruben mentioned from that family, continuing to write. And I think that's if you feel compelled to write, you should write. And if they don't respond, then you have done what your heart needed to happen for you. And ultimately that has to be what it's about. So, I think that's important. Did anybody have anything that they wanted to share about their process?
Or ask any questions. I think now might be a good time. If anybody had any specific questions, similar to Kim's before she had to go, we're happy to answer.
I do have a question. Can y'all hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Because it's been 9 years, could I call one of y'all or whoever's has his records to let me know if his recipient is still living?
Absolutely. We can do that. It might take a little tracking back, but we absolutely can do that. It's never, like we mentioned, always if it's something on your heart, we're going to try to make it happen.
And we do have those files from 9 years ago, so that should be something that we can help facilitate. And then we would be able to do a wellness check with the transplant center and provide you some information on your recipients. So Kingsley actually has a slide with their contact information.
Okay.
Okay.
While she's pulling that up, are there any other questions?
Okay, well, on there now should be the direct contact information for myself and for Ruben. And as I mentioned, we are the Donor Family Services Aftercare Coordinator. So anytime after donation, we are here to take care of our families. And so we would love to answer any questions you have, if not today, anytime. And you have our numbers there as well as our contact emails. And I am hoping that this is going to be something that we do at least once, maybe twice a year as we grow as an organization and have new donor heroes and new donor families that we're involved with. We'd really like for them to have this information. So anything that you would, think may be helpful to know, we would love to know so that we can, make this as fruitful and helpful to the families as we possibly can.
I had a quick question, Kingsley.
Sure.
I haven't, John was a tissue donor, and I know after he was an organ donor, obviously, as well. And then I received a note that was just pretty vague. It's like his, kidney went here. I mean, it told me kind of the generalizations, but I've not ever received anything about tissue. Should I have received a note that said if any of his tissues were used that outlined that?
That's a great question, Julie. And it is a little bit different for tissue. So for tissue, and we, Christine,
Go ahead, sorry.
take it?
Sorry, go ahead.
Usually if we reach out, we can definitely find out, but it's not something that we automatically get when it comes to organ. We automatically have that information immediately, but for tissue, because it's so many different gifts, and because the length of time is so long that they don't send it automatically. So we can absolutely get it for you. And actually, Julie, I actually reached out after our conversation last time. So I definitely have some emails in to find out if we can about tissue. And also that I didn't mention is that there can be many different kind of gifts. So there's many different people that you're reaching out to. So you might want to write one letter, and that one letter would go to all the different recipients that your loved one got, or you can specialize it for specifically the person who got your loved one's heart or the person who got your loved one's kidney. You can do it either way. There's no right or wrong, but it can be done separately or as one note, either way. But Julie, that's a great question.
And Julie, I do want to, I think also your question has to do with the initial letter, right? That you received that detailed what John's gifts was able to be from an organ donor. Is that also, and you were asking about whether or not you should have received something about a tissue donation as well?
Right.
Yes. Okay. Right. So our letters now, we've gone through a redraft of the process, but they do identify both organ and tissue in those letters. So our families now receive a letter that gives information about the age, location, and sex of the recipients. And then it also talks about the enhancing gifts of tissue, but it doesn't provide specific information. about the tissue gifts at that time, because as Ruben mentioned, it hasn't been shared yet. So our letter, and we can go back and look at your letters, but your initial letter from us should have mentioned in there that he was also a tissue donor. They absolutely do now. So we can definitely make sure that you have that. But in terms of new families, I do know that we've retooled our letters to ensure that it identifies all the gifts, organ and tissue, that families were receiving.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions that anybody has? I want to thank you all for making some time this evening to be here and to share on our very first workshop. And as I mentioned, you have our contacts, and we'd love to hear from you if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if there's anything that you would love to learn more about, we would love to reach out and share that with you. We are so grateful for your gifts and your donor heroes, and we are looking forward to getting back to a place where we can actually interact with you in real life and away from our computers. And we will hopefully be resuming as soon as we can. But if you did get our email, you probably got a link that has some other information for other events for the rest of the year. And we want to encourage you to be with us virtually until we can be together in person. Any other questions?
I had one more.
Sure, Julie.
I have just one more thing I wanted to share is that I have been able to watch. I was at a wedding where the dad was John's liver recipient. So I got to watch him walk his daughter down the aisle, which was a very cool thing. And I got to watch him have his first dance. And then they had a chair for him at another wedding that was in the upstate. So two daddies got to walk their babies down the aisle. And it's stuff like that, I think, that makes it all worthwhile. So if you're kind of feeling like maybe questioning whether or not you should reach out, I really just highly encourage people to reach out, because it'll bless you in ways you can't imagine.
Thank you so much, Julie. And that's why correspondence is so important. This is the first step, kind of reaching out and talking with letters, and that gets to the point where you may be able to meet and have those beautiful experiences. So we're so grateful for that. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and take care of yourselves, and everybody stay safe, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, thanks for the call.
Bye-bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
very welcome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great evening.